Welcome back to the Cineposium podcast, where each week members or collaborators of Cineposium curate films for remote viewing, and then talk about those films on this podcast. In this week's episode, Reed Williams, Samantha Tecson, and Mike Mazzacane discuss two Mortal Kombat films. Enjoy the conversation.
Get over here and listen to our podcast about Mortal Kombat. Hello again, everyone. I'm Reed Williams. We have Michael Mazzacane, Samantha Tecson here. We're going to talk about the OG Mortal Kombat from 1995 and the newest Mortal Kombat from this year, 2021. And before we get into it, maybe, this is probably a franchise, obviously both a video game franchise and a film franchise that we both have, varying degrees of experience and affection for. So maybe that's a good place to start. We can just sort of talk about what our relationship is to this franchise and maybe kind of go from talking about the specific films from there. So, yeah.
I think most people's intro to this is I saw videos online. I'd see the game at stores. My parents are from, I was born looking at the first film, born a year after that first film, so 96, but my parents played the game, so it's very well known to me, even though I maybe touched 2 games ever and I suck at fighting games, so I just consistently watch more. That it's such a wild story. Go in the wiki, literally look at that. There's an original timeline, there's a new timeline, things are wild, there's Days of Futures Past plots. It's a very entertaining series. From the video game, I think this is the first time of me actually fully watching the first OG film, because I'd heard about it, I've seen it memed, I've seen the gamer list of best, worst, maybe favorite gaming movies. So my interest in the series is I love looking up the craziness of the plot. I love watching videos on it. I love watching Sonic Fox and all them on at Evo and other fighting game tournaments, even though I know nothing, rocking this game. So I think it's just a hilariously campy in its own way, probably that's why, series that just keeps on growing. But the fact that it's able to have movies, and both movies, and we don't talk about Annihilation, is pretty successful. And the fact it had comics that were okay, but they exist, but they were for the games more. And they also had web series that did pretty well. So I'm kind of glad it's a successful series for as campy as it is. And probably out of all of the fighting games, we usually think of ones that they're usually tied to Japan more. Mortal Kombat's one of the only ones tied to America that's, I want to say, super, super, very, very popular. I think the other one would be, of course, I want to say Killer Instinct and Injustice by the same company. Killer Instinct not by the same company, but for the most part, Mortal Kombat I think is more well known, and there's a reason. There's Crayola color ninjas of different genders, and there's just wild craziness. So that's my introduction to the series, and I just say for anyone, you don't have to play the games. You can just watch all the random things about it.
No, yeah, that's a great point, and I'm glad you know all the intricacies of the story, because even though this is a franchise I've been familiar since I was a little kid, I don't know any of that. And I think I have a soft spot for Mortal Kombat in my heart because it was the taboo video game when I was growing up. And so it felt very transgressive to secretly play it at your friend's house and hope that your mom didn't find out or something. So, I've always, even though it's pretty tame compared to newer games that have courted controversy, I guess I do have fond memories of that being my first kind of big boy, you're not allowed to do kind of thing, like Beavis and Butthead or something. So I did play the games kind of throughout the years when I could, and I haven't played this newest one, but I played the one before it. And yeah, I don't know, it's interesting. You bring up the longevity of the franchise and all different kinds of media, and it is funny because the plot is so kind of ridiculous and campy, like you said. Sam. So, yeah, I can't really necessarily explain why it's sort of stuck in my consciousness for so long, but that's kind of my personal relationship with the games at least. And then the movie I genuinely like I think it's one of those movies you see when you're young, and then it kind of gets past the window where you start thinking more critically about that stuff. And so I watched it recently for our podcast, and I enjoyed rewatching it, even though I recognize that, like you're saying, it's like sort of the best worst video game movie, I guess. So anyway, yeah, that's sort of my relationship to it. What about you, Mike?
Um, so like historically speaking, Mortal Kombat is very important because it is one of the centerpiece games of the 93-94 congressional hearings, along with Night Trap. Um, During that era, before the SRB was really a thing, and Nintendo tried to throw Sega under the bus, and like it was one of also the first. Yeah, like definitely not one of the. Okay, my history isn't that like calling it the first isn't right because the Mario Brothers movie came out, but like in the '90s, it was a part of a new breed of video game film, and like for the longest time, it was that franchise that has a convoluted lore. I hate that word, but like a convoluted like fandom, like a fans who like love this as a like narrative unit to understand, and stories are being told because it's an arcade fighter where you get like 5 frames at the end that are supposed to tell everything. It's like Street Fighter had the same problem, and it wasn't really until till Mortal Kombat 9, the reboot just simply known as Mortal Kombat that came out in 2011, that I played at PAX East, or I guess it was PAX Prime at the time, because I won a trip to PAX through Machinima. I guess with Machinima, classic, decades old, now dead YouTube and Warner Brothers properties, where like I played that and the new Duke Nukem game that got announced, which was really the old Duke Nukem game that I was like, Duke Nukem's not really there. But it wasn't until really that one that they actually told a what like you would consider like a cinematic story, because it was the first game that made like I want to play this game for the story mode. Like
Mm.
I, the last Mortal Kombat game, which was what's the last? It's not Mortal Kombat 10. Is this just Mortal Kombat 11?
I
Yeah,
think
11
so.
was the most
Yeah,
recent one.
yeah.
Like I just wanted to play that game because I wanted to follow the story. Kind of absurd, but like I say like too much, but as a franchise, it's one that has gotten away with this threat of gory violence and just kind of like not taking itself seriously and trying to fit pieces together, because like Sub-Zero 1 becomes Noob Saibot, but then timelines, as Samantha has referenced, becomes a thing. And it's just, but like as movies, there have been Mortal Kombat, Annihilation, and this one. And also Mortal Kombat Legends, Mortal Kombat Legends dash Scorpion's Revenge, an animated film from 2020, which is the best Mortal Kombat movie.
Oh, really?
Like that's kind of damning with faint praise to say like it's the best
Yeah.
one, but
Yeah.
let me put it this way: it fulfills the basics of Western dramaturgy the best.
Okay, that's fair.
I feel like I've been like, oh, the snooty pedantic asshole, because like one, I am somewhat of that kind of person, but like it's just I'm not like this new Mortal Kombat movie that came out that we watched. Guys, it's not good. I'm not gonna like it. It doesn't tell us. There is no story. There is no actual Mortal Kombat. You somehow take the game that is predicated on a fighting tournament occurring, that you could just take many martial arts movies like Enter the Dragon, which
yeah.
and instead like this new one directed by Simon McQuaid and written by who's the co-written by Greg Russo and Dave Callahan. Just it's all a prequel to Mortal Kombat. Like the actual Mortal Kombat will be DLC or a sequel to this. It's just this movie is not good. The violence is fun. Like I would recommend you finding certain fight scenes on YouTube,
Yeah.
but there's no story. Cole Young, played by Louis Tan, who I actually kind of like as an actor, has nothing to do in this movie, despite being the nominal lead of this movie. Like Louis Tan was in
Mhm.
Into the Badlands, solid underrated show.
Oh yeah.
He shows up as Shatterstar in Deadpool 2 for a second, but like he is a workable actor.
Hmm.
Like he's fine, and it just like he is a nothing character. Like the movie tells you everything and shows you nothing except for the violence, which is cool and on a like
Yeah.
lizard brain juvenile
Yeah.
level,
Yeah.
which isn't bad. Like I enjoyed those moments. Sam can
Same.
attest to that. But like this wasn't a good movie. It's like my reaction to Godzilla versus King Kong and the disconnect I feel from people who are like, I want to see this in a movie theater because it's big, loud, and dumb. And I'm like,
Right.
I don't want to spend like I don't know how much ticket prices cost where you're at right now, Reed. But like I don't want
Yeah.
to spend $12 to $15 to see this or Godzilla versus King Kong. I will
Right.
pay. That's it. I would totally pay $20 to see Zack Snyder's Justice League Justice's Gray edition in
Uh-huh.
a AMC like Sony like what's the really nice theater that they have? Like I would just do that like
Oh,
this
like the
movie.
Dolby or
Yeah, the Atmos
something.
theaters and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
I was
Yeah.
gonna
this
say
Yeah.
like
movie,
Cinepolises.
yeah, something like that. But it's just like this movie just it's not good. And so like the idea of I just get it as part of my subscription to HBO Max, like
Yeah.
lessens the blow
Sure.
for me because I'm like, okay, it is not costing me that much more money to see this. So the value
Yeah.
proposition ends, but I just like I it ends on the promise of a sequel that I'm like, I don't really kind of know about that. I feel like I'm just here like we were having so much fun earlier before we started recording. I'm like, and I'm just like, guys, this movie's terrible.
No, I'm glad to hear your perspective because, like, I agree with you. I don't. There is no story really, and I actually kind of liked it for that. Like, I was, we could kind of, I guess, talk about both the original and the new one, kind of, in simultaneously, because the old one, I feel like they really did try and shoehorn like a story into it. And with this newer one, I agree, like it wasn't good in the traditional sense of Western dramaturgy, as you put it earlier, because yeah, there's really nothing. There's like, I don't know, even if I understood it's like basically, you know, there's this big Mortal Kombat tournament. If Earth loses, this evil realm run by this evil sorcerer can take it over, right? And it's like you have to have this mark to compete in it. That's basically the plot of the new one. And then there's a whole lot of other stuff, I guess, as far as like how you get your superpowers. But you know, I guess I feel like it did capture that feeling in the newer games where it kind of transitions from like plot into the fighting. I did really enjoy that, and I did enjoy a lot of kind of the set pieces, like you said too. So I guess I agree with you, but I did enjoy watching it, I guess. And maybe it was that thing of, oh, I got to do it in my house, like on a rainy day in my PJs instead of paying, $15 to watch it at an AMC where people are like eating popcorn next to me. That it is interesting that you bring that up because that does definitely inform the experience. But yeah, how did you enjoy the newest film, and what are your thoughts on kind of the older one, if you want to get into that too, Sam?
So, like thinking about it and thinking about the price thing, I think we already know based off again the history of by itself the history of Mortal Kombat, which in itself had Deception, Armageddon in games that were like the fall of the series, and it's really funny that both films pull characters from. No, actually, sorry, the other film could have not pulled characters from it because it would have those two would have not come out yet. But the new film did. It'd be like, yeah, there's Reiko, and I'm like, oh gosh, and then oh gosh, the flying chick was also from. Like they started adding so many characters that was kind of the fall, and their convoluted story was the fall of the series. for a bit, and in general the history of video game films, which we know none of them I would ever put and say, hey guys, these films are great. Like they are always campy great, which to some people who aren't, I want to say, into that are like, oh, these are just bad, but it's like, no, it's in the same degree of like, I love Mamma Mia sort of thing, where it's like, will I tell you
that's interesting.
Mamma Mia is
Please don't mention Mamma Mia.
oh yeah, sorry, Mike, quick, turn off your things. Insert film here with Meryl Streep. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I would never tell you these films are like, God, these are actually full-blown cinematic. It's like, no, they're fun. I will acknowledge they're not what we would put into like a category of like, yes, award it for this, but it's like they're fun. So knowing that in the standards for video game movies aren't that high, they're very fun, and it's like I probably would still pay to go watch it, because even then, without the comfort of home, imagining like the music, which I know we can get into like later, but like the fighting and stuff on like a bigger screen, no matter how campy and cheesy it is, I would be willing to pay, because it's gonna look way better in like, again, those big screens, just to see like all the fatality references, like when Jax pops that guy's head in the new one. And in the old one, even when Sonya is just like cracking Kano's neck, and the Goro fight is like, yeah, that's probably ridiculously even more fun in a theater, also with probably a fellow gamers and stuff, like being not too rowdy where it's bad, but like, rowdy enough where they're like, oh,
yeah.
For both of them. I do agree. They're both not quintessentially good. I would probably give them both like a 7 or 8, because they're just entertaining. I think the old one, when they did add the plot, I think it's just none of them matched the actual plot of the games, which again, very ridiculous. But the first one, I think, was literally just, there's a tournament, everyone fight. And then the descriptions had, little tidbits. So the first one had, random, Scorpion and Sub-Zero in it, and those are like the people's favorite characters. And they had Liu Kang still as the main hero in that one versus a newbie. So you had Liu Kang, which people can see, he's the main character. I think they do a good job of like, he's the main character, it makes sense. But the other parts were just more on them than it is the game, or them stealing game lore. They're like, you need to use the ability of life. Oh, you mean water? It's like, I don't think that's how it worked in MK, But I think they got the characterizations correct in the first one. Like Sonya is very straightforward. Johnny Cage is actually hilariously a little bit smart when he's like, maybe we shouldn't sneak into this place, and they're like, no, we're gonna go in. Liu Kang is weird in terms of like, he always feels like he's clearly the main character, but they'll either fluctuate between he's sort of a little like he's the super stereotype of like the good boy monk, and then the other side is in the original MK, he's a little like, well, I went to America and this guy killed my brother, I'm gonna seek revenge. And it's like, I don't think I think he would seek vengeance, but not as hardcore as that. Like he'd still be like, oh, you can calm me down pretty easily, Raiden, versus like, no, Raiden, you gotta like hold me back, I'm about to get on Shang Tsung right now. So the fact that the stories themselves aren't that great in either one. Which one is worse? I think Cole is boring versus the other one is Liu Kang's kind of entertaining. Because again, maybe biasly, it's because we knew it. I think both of them rely on knowledge of the game or knowledge of the characters, but like Liu Kang seems a little bit more entertaining because his thing seemed, because the beginning starts with like, your soul is mine, and then the whole brother scene that you're like, I'd seek revenge pretty easily over this dude. Versus the other one, it doesn't really happen until later. I'll give it that Cole is really smart in terms of he quickly accepts everything that they told him. They're like, yeah, there's a supernatural thing going on. Okay, yeah, that guy's hunting me. Let's go. We're gonna get in this car.
Cole's
But
also probably suffering from some kind of undiagnosed head trauma. He is a former MMA fighter.
That's true. That's a good point.
He was already having, was it the psychic connection to Scorpion? I think also both of them have the prophecy plot too. Because the first one, all of a sudden, for some reason, they're like, yeah, I need Sonya, I need this. And you're like, why? And then you kind of are figuring out there's probably a prophecy element to that as well. That the reason why Shang Tsung's doing some stuff is to befriend, to make sure, again, Shang Tsung in both films, and we can get into Shang Tsung by himself, but by himself, he's consistently like, you said there's rules? Nah. But like there's obviously a prophecy element. The other one, they blatantly say it like there's a prophecy. Well, Scorpion's so badass. We need to prevent Scorpion from being badass. And then, oh no, we're feeding into the thing, aren't we? Dang it. That always happens. So, but it was done through, let me read a quote, what they said for Cole in the new one, where according to screenwriter Greg Russo, so in publicity material for the MK movie, he said that Cole's character or storyline came from a part of his own life. As he began working on the project, he and his spouse were about to have their first child. He incorporated his own questions about what it meant to be a father and if he would be a good dad to the character. Cole was envisioned as akin to the Shinjuku-like character arc often used to introduce like a newcomer. So facilitating the role of reintroducing the story via existing characters, that being everyone but Cole, of course. And then providing the audience with a new protagonist experience, which kind of like Reed said goes along with the new games in which we got new characters with old ones. So we got, Cassie Cage, Johnny Cage and Sony Kid's kid. We got Jax's daughter, Jacqueline. We got and we got the assumption characters like Kenshi's kid, and we got like Kung Lao's gay cousin. I forget his name. Also as new characters in 10, and then they kept only Jackie and Cassie and then added new ones consistently through those two games. So I could see the reasoning for doing it, but he was just so boring. Like Liu Kang, maybe because we knew him, or maybe because that intro is so iconic and really within one scene builds a character, that he didn't really have that. Our introduction was about Scorpion, not about Cole. And also disappointing, Cole's name on like every other Mortal Kombat convention does not start with a K. It's literally Cole. It's not Kole. That's disappointing. But yeah, back to you guys saying it. It's really entertaining. I was entertained.
Uh-huh.
Not a good plot for either one.
And, like, to kind of build the movie up a little bit, how they handled making references to the source material, I found to be quite good. Like the scene where Liu Kang just low sweeps Kano over and over again was perfect. It was hilarious comedy.
That cracked me up.
Like it's hilarious comedy that works on both a level of that's funny physical humor and also just like, man, if you ever play someone in a fighting game and you don't know how to block low, like that's what happens to you. And like how they handled the visual Easter eggs and stuff. Like overall, I think the tonality of the series of this movie was sound. Just everything around it didn't work. Like the first 7 minutes. Well, no, it's the first scene that is the prologue that deals with Sub-Zero and Scorpion's fight in 17th century Japan. Probably the best single scene in the movie. It's also basically a short film unto itself.
Yeah.
Like, go watch that. That's an excellent fight.
Yeah.
Like, and it works. There's drama. And then it just cuts to Cole, and you're just like, who are you? Why? And then I was just kind of like, God damn, I say like too much. Anyway, like, fuck. Anywho.
It's the SoCal in us. You can't get it out. We say like. We say like more than they say fatality.
Yeah, but we come to Cole, who is this washed up MMA fighter who is still really young in his career, so that makes questions. But
yeah, that's a good point.
The main thing for me though is he's having his young daughter act as his corner woman.
Right.
That's not good parenting. Unlike like Mortal Kombat in a lot of ways is a franchise that has become about parenting and how being a combatant is probably bad parenting time. Or in the case of Jackie and an alternative timeline version of her dad in MK11, good parenting time. That's more the exception than Bruce rule. Yeah, it just thinking back on it, the second act of this movie is where it's bad because it just scenes happen because they need to be training sequences that aren't really training sequences.
Test your might.
Right.
It's 110 minutes long. I wonder if they have like 20 to 30 minutes just cut out of the movie.
Yeah.
That would have
Yeah.
given some, depth or character to things.
That's a great point. Yeah, that part does feel really truncated, where it's like Kano gets to just get really mad, and then with Cole, they just keep punching him repeatedly. Like, your superpowers will come with pain. Like, that part is ridiculous.
Cole getting armor though really fits his whole character of you don't fight well anymore and you just keep getting punched in the face a lot. So here we're gonna put
That's so
on a skin suit for you that absorbs energy. It really fits.
He also was the only one who was not able to single-handedly, like Mike and I were discussing this in like that. So if we were to compare again both films, a lot of them were able to single-handedly take on their opponents in different ways. Like Johnny Cage taking on Goro in the first film, he got lucky, but he like it's still by himself. He also takes on Scorpion. Yeah, Johnny Cage could be Scorpion. Okay, but like that logic. And then you have Cole, who legitimately couldn't beat anyone by himself. He couldn't beat Milena. He literally, like, Sonya comes in out of nowhere and is like, "Whatcha? I got her the Sonic things," which I'm like, that's not really her like power. That'd been funny if they gave her the finisher kiss. She's the only one I don't think that did any. She kind of did some fatalities, but I mean, like, did any of her ones that we think of automatically? But she had to come in. She's the one who killed Milena, and then the person who killed Bihan Sub-Zero, so Sub-Zero Elder for anyone who's listening, is that was Scorpion who did it, which I'm like, that makes thematic sense, but also like, Cole, you suck. You really couldn't do anything. And the person who even saved his family wasn't him, because he's trying to, he's like doing punch in the eyes. He's like, gonna punch the eyes. And it was like, it was NetherRealm angry, vengeful Scorpion that's like fire. And then like, oh, look, they're all freed. I'm like, Cole, you couldn't do anything by yourself. He was just the guy who's like, let me be inspirational at this point and say, we need to all work together for the power of friendship to defeat all these bad guys. And they're like, you're right, Cole. You're so right. It's like, what? And like, Raiden could have done that, but they made Raiden super sassy, that he sounded like he didn't care for a lot of the film, and then all of a sudden he's like, thanks, guy. Thank you, Shang Tsung, because you pissed them off. They learned their powers. And I'm like, Raiden, you're kind of petty. Like, what? But
he's trying to be Dumbledore, but
right.
But even Dumbledore helps Harry Potter out.
Yeah, like I said, the first film, people took on things by themselves. Even if we gave them a little bit, like Katana had to come in the first film and be like, use water or something, but Liu Kang still beat a lot of people by himself. Again, so did Sonya kills Kano in both films, by the way. Her forever arch nemesis. I'm glad for that consistency.
That's true.
But yeah, Cole sucks.
I mean, I wonder if this is kind of like, not comparing these quality wise, but it's like the Rocky 1 versus the Rocky 2, where maybe they're setting, because that's a trope too, where it's like the guy that kind of sucks at everything, but he's still the protagonist for some reason. So, like Mike was saying, this is another case where they're just setting up a franchise. And that is definitely like a pet peeve of mine. Like that was basically, and I know you're a fan of this trilogy, but that was basically the Split movie, was like a whole setup to this. Like, that's all movies are nowadays. They're like just setting up franchises and maintaining a franchise.
It had a post-credit sequence that revealed.
And your Mortal Kombat fight happening.
Split was like it was. What is? It had a post-credit sequence that revealed that it takes place in the same universe as Glass. It functions on its own.
Was that a post-credit sequence with Bruce Willis? Oh, okay. All right, my bad. Well, that was just the first example that came to mind.
No,
but,
it's okay.
That's the whole thing of just, we all knew there was going to be a setup to a sequel before we even watched that. Like, we've been trained to that behavior. So I don't know. I just wonder if they are setting up a longer character.
Is it just like how they did it? Because I think there's ones like Mike said, if it's self-contained and you have at the end, it's like that feels fine. Like if we go like a real recall, like the first Iron Man is super self-contained, and if it wasn't for that end sequence, which again was like after credits, they could have literally just pretended it didn't happen either, and that was within themselves. But Mike and I were watching the film because we had watched it together. I was like, how much time? Like he moved the mouse and we saw how much time was left, and we're like, and I literally said, like, they haven't had the tournament yet. Oh no. And we realized they were setting up. The first film only did at the end, to go back to the first film, because when I was rewatching it, he only says it at the end where he's like, they're like, wait, where is that power coming from? The King's like, where's that power coming from? And then White Raiden is like, that is from the Emperor. And they do a good job of mentioning Shao Kahn several times, because again, people knew, it's like the stuff like, Shao Kahn's mentioned at some point, but like that makes sense. At the same time, they could have just ended it there and we would have been fine, but it wasn't like obvious, because the main thing, again, going back to, they have a story. They keep the main bad guy of that story at the end with like that iconic Shang Tsung, but it didn't feel as like, we wouldn't been like, I don't think I feel as bothered as like, it wasn't as heavy hitting to be like, there's obviously a sequel. This one felt like it turned in the like towards that like the last few sections when you knew it was like, we're getting closer and closer. I don't think this is happening. That they're like, I wonder, guys, if there was a tournament there, when would it happen?
We still have to fight.
Man, we haven't made it to the tournament part yet. And Shang Tsung has the line drop of like, when I come, I'm gonna come back with an army. We see Katana's fans in the background, and I think it's because they're just very blatantly blue. So whenever they're like in the scenes, it was hard to miss. I'm like, those are Katana's fans. We saw Milena, so if people know Milena, they know Katana. You see Shao Kahn's statues, they're like, oh, we know. And then of course the very, very end where they're like, and Raiden, his retort, being like, oh, we're gonna go find more people. And it's like, Raiden, I think you could have given people out. You're an elder god. I think you could have given people the tattoo. You were being mean to Sonya the entire time about it. But like, in general, I was like, this film is a prequel. No.
Yeah. Well, I actually liked. Oh, sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
No, you go. I was just gonna say it's the worst kind of prequel, but
I was just gonna say I did like the idea of like they're being hunted down. I thought that was kind of a cool plot mechanic, because it does make the story feel a little more natural than just like, hey, this is a fighting game and there's a tournament. But again, it's like, to both of your points, it's like that could have been the second act of is them being hunted down, and then the third act could have been like the big tournament. But like you're saying, instead of, it's like, no, we have to set up this franchise and then add all the stuff that doesn't work. Like, but yeah, what were you saying about the worst kind of prequel though? I'm curious to hear
that. It's the worst kind of prequel is the one that obviously is there to act as the thing before the thing, and it's the kind of like franchise filmmaking that people inspired by the success of the MCU have gone towards, and then always mess up. We're like, no, we're gonna do this thing where the thing doesn't really happen. And honestly, none of my complaints about this movie would matter if I liked any of the characters. That is not to say that the acting in this film is like there are bad performances, because like Joe Taslim, I think that's how you say his name, is fantastic as Sub-Zero. He goes and does some Tom Hardy like in a mask levels of eye acting. And also just like go watch him in Warrior, fantastic show. Also The Raid. He's Sergeant Chaka from The Raid, fantastic. Like Makad Brooks left Supergirls to go make this movie. and like he's actually like pretty good in it. It just, he has nothing to do except kind of weekly be like, oh, my new robot arms aren't me, because they're also roughly about way out of proportion with my actual arms. And just Hiroyuki Sanada in 10 seconds of hugging his on-screen wife and telling her that he is blessed to be in her presence is more character work than anyone else gets in this movie. And it's delightful. Then also later on, he when he's in the full Scorpion gimmick, he's constantly taking off his mask to talk to Cole, who is his descendant. And do you really need to take the mask on and off so much?
I
And it's
think
like the
we also-
Walmarts around here in North Carolina take their masks anyway. Sorry, bad joke. What were you saying, Sam?
Okay. Oh, I was saying like that's a pretty good joke. I was saying like I think we're like I don't know if he understands Japanese because like he doesn't say anything back, and I think there's just like the warriors understanding. So they was like, I'm pretty sure Cole by this point maybe doesn't know it. And then even if I might get or joke is like, oh, what if they're like those bad, like, you know, like we go to anime conventions, like what if they're the people that like the ones that go to the anime cons are like, I only watched anime, so I totally know Japanese, and you're like, no. Or like we've seen it in the cinephile part where they're like, I watched these language film, I watched all the the new cinema films and stuff, and we're like, I can speak French now. But I'm like, I really doubt he understands. So he's just turning to him, he's like, I hope this man doesn't murder him, because you kind of see at the end where he also like backs up after Scorpion takes off his things, and he's like, and he's like, like protect my legacy, my Mortal Kombat legacy, and then like, Cole's just like, okay, let me see my family. Like, I'm pretty sure he doesn't understand, so they probably like it could have been a heart to heart, but I'm sure Cole's just like, yeah, what? Cool. Bye. Like you came out of nowhere and said stuff and killed him. Great.
How did he get summoned? This is
from the blade, right?
Yes, like this
was
is
like
asking
the
too much.
blood blade.
Yeah, like the blood blade brings out demon grandpa or demon great grandpa, I guess.
All Cole Young serves is a MacGuffin to summon the cool version of Scorpion that we all want.
He is kind of a human MacGuffin, huh?
Yeah, because like in the first film, they're just there. You know, like it's not. You know, Shang Tsung's just like their enemy. Like I rewatched the first film, the '94 film. They're just there, and Shang Tsung's like the greatest of enemies, but also under my control because souls. And then they like, I feel like they didn't catch that they're like, oh shit. And then this one, they're like, yeah, he just appears. And it was like, and we did explain he was another realm and you know stuff, but we're not going to explain that Quan Chi or other people are involved in this plan. He just got summoned by the blood. Yeah. Oh, also, I know we showed those trailers with the fights with him and Scorpion. Yeah, Scorpion's only at the ending and the beginning of the film. But we hyped that really bad on this.
Oh, you're on mute, Mike.
Darn it. Mike. I was making a fun joke about how Hiroyuki Sanada was too busy filming Army of the Dead. But it's, what is it? Oh, I had a thought. Oh no, let me use this to talk about Scorpion's Revenge real quick, which is a direct to home animated film from 2020 that essentially tells the story of Mortal Kombat 1, which is the first third of Mortal Kombat 9, because Mortal Kombat 9 is them going timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly. We're going to go through the first three games narrative-wise in one. It's fantastic game actually, but in that one, in Scorpion's Revenge, Scorpion is the lead protagonist, and so we have a protagonist that is functional, that has desires to kill Bihan, but it tells a story that also features Mortal Kombat and also fits in all the other stuff that this movie does of Sonya is trying to kill Kano because he has kidnapped Jax, and Jax also gets his arms ripped off. Just, as you do in Mortal Kombat games.
Right.
And it does all of this in, how long is Scorpion's Revenge? I gotta say it's not quite 90 minutes, it's probably 100. It is 80, it's 80 minutes long.
Oh, wow.
Scorpion's Revenge tells a better story, a better Mortal Kombat story than either of these films. And also the animation allows them to go in and do the X-ray vision that really came about from the MK9 through 11 set of games.
Oh, right. Where you see the like bones breaking and stuff, right?
Yeah, it's always funny they do those X-rays and then you keep fighting it. It doesn't make sense in the movie either, but it looks cool. It aesthetically gives me the feeling and chemical rush of playing Mortal Kombat.
Okay.
In a way that this movie, they have the Liu Kung Lao Saw hat fatality, and it's gnarly. Not as
Right.
gnarly as the stuff from MK11, honestly, because they really got into the whole we're going to have unique simulations for how organs would fall out of your body every time, sort of that. But you still see him saw Nitara in half, and it works. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
watch Scorpion's Revenge, the good Mortal Kombat movie.
It sounds like it sounds like it's in the vein of those. Is it like Warner Brothers that did it to kind of the direct video, like Batman and like
Oh yeah,
DC kind of animated movies? That's interesting. They did that with Mortal Kombat. I'll have to check that out.
and
Like,
the funny thing about it is that for the longest time, those DC animated films are all rated PG-13. They really should have been rated R because of they're really bloody.
Yeah,
It's
they are.
it's very it's one of those things where I'm just like it's once not to go on a rant about the farcical nature of the MPAA, but it's one of those things that's like MPAA, you're a farce. And so this one, because they're actually being very gory and showing bloody bits, it's it's actually rated R. I gotta say this about the Mortal Kombat 2021 movie. It is rated R. I don't like all the CGI blood. It lacks a materiality. When like Scorpion is going through the ninjas in the prologue sequence, there's some there is some like corn syrup blood going on, but a lot of the squibs are all just excessive CGI blood sprats, and
Yeah.
it wasn't that great to me. Just Akira Kurosawa could really make blood splatter, and so it's just this lack of materiality of blood spray. Just we see
That's
these.
so interesting.
You have all this awesome bloody violence, but also it just kind of feels so. I don't know, weightless. Even though they do the thing, like so many of our comments back and forth to each other, Sarah was, they did the thing. They did the
Yeah.
thing. And
Well,
it's true, they did the thing.
well, that's so interesting because a big fan complaint about the OG Mortal Kombat is that it really isn't like very. It doesn't capture the spirit of the games insofar as how bloody and gory and like over the top the violence is in the original. So it's interesting to hear you say that though, because it's almost like for you, there may as well have not been any gore or blood because the CGI blood felt empty to you. Is that fair to say? Did I capture that, or is that maybe putting words in your mouth?
it's probably a bit of that, and also it didn't make me care. I didn't care about the violence, but also
Oh, okay.
I've also been watching a bunch of like slasher movies and violence stuff where
Yeah,
it's like I love action movies. It's a little desensitizing. I'm probably
right.
messed up, but this one it's just look, the violence in say Kill Bill's Crazy 88 fight
Yeah.
where Uma Thurman is chopping limbs and just blood is splattering everywhere is more viscerally impactful than just than seeing the head clap fatality, which was cool, but also it was kind of
Like narrative wise, it was like that. I think some of it also didn't make sense narrative wise to add on to that. Whereas like if you think about it, why did Jax want to get that violent? Because out of all honesty, the other ones, yeah, it makes sense for the bad guys because their intent was to like we know Kano's a murderer. We know Cabal's a super murderer. If he's like, yeah, Kano messed me up, man. But you know, in terms of it's like, yeah, why would Jax, someone who's like a little bit like quintessentially nicer, would be like, yeah, I'm gonna clap this guy's head. It's like, whoa, shit, what? Like, whoa, Jax. That's kind of extreme. Sonya had more of a reason, but like you could tell hers was like defensive because she's reaching for something, and hers was like the not fatality one. Luke Aang's is probably the nicest one in a sense as well because he's like
he lights a man who had been burned alive on fire again.
Yeah, it's quote nicer because it's not as like bloody, okay, and it's not as graphic. But like in comparison to even the first one was as bloody violent. I mean, that one was what, rated T, right? The first one, or even if it was rated M, it was like the lesser rated M back then, like a soft one.
On the idea of the original film not capturing the violent spirit of the original games, I would actually argue it really does, because it's all on if you played Mortal Kombat for the SNES, you didn't
Mhm.
get the blood. You got like green splatter.
That's true.
And
You're
even
like,
if
it
you
does
played it
capture
in,
it, the censored one.
well, no, not even that. Like even if you played an arcade game, like it's these 16-bit graphics of, oh, haha, I've ripped out your skull in a reference to Predator.
Right.
Is it really that violent? Because compared to the violence of MK9 through 11,
Right. Exactly.
there is a different level of just excessive realistic bodily brutality that
Right.
it captures an impact. Like even I still watch them from time to time. It's like, oh, let's just watch this because it's funny. But
Right.
there's this film is closer, I think, to the MK9 level of gore, but it isn't quite torture porny. There
Yeah.
isn't an
Yeah.
eyeball hanging out from Hostel.
Yeah, I think the purpose of like the new one is closer to like the new games. The old one, of course, is old, closer to the older games. Where it's like it's funny that people were like, oh, it didn't capture the violence. It's like when you think about it though, now that we've gone so much more, like not to add fuel to the people's fire who are like violence in video games. So we have gotten more images in media, whether it be from like the news of like real life events that people don't warn you about, and they're like, here you go, and you're like, oh god, you should have said something, to even like normal films and other stuff. Like we're very inundated with a bunch more. Not to always pick on Tarantino, but like Tarantino, Scorsese, and other was like there's been a lot more that by the time we get to, I want to say even then that Mortal Kombat film, it's like, oh, it didn't capture the violence. Like, the violence had changed by then. Like that is the same campy violence that I did in that first game, if you think about it, where it's pretty like, again, campy and pretty basic. My problem with the first one was like, okay, well, scorpions, his get over here, his shuriken rope does not work the way it did in that first film. Okay, it's like the new film where it's a literal like shuriken on a chain. And in the first film, it was a weird plant thing that popped up from his from his hand. I was like, it was like the proto like, like the 2000 Sam Raimi Spider-Man films where like, yeah, his like natural webs versus I'm like, he uses a web shooter because he's a smart kid is the thing. It was kind of like that. I was like, guys, that makes no sense. That like, okay, I'm asking for sense in a Mortal Kombat film. But for Scorpion, I was like, look, his supernatural elements is the fire and technically the teleport, which then is a little. He also teaches Takeda to do the teleport, so maybe that's not. Maybe that's just like it's supernatural spell skills, but like him having the ability to pop it out of his hand, that was not a thing. Just saying, that wasn't one. But I think the first one maybe is because the plot, they were like, that doesn't feel Mortal Kombat. At the same time, I think both are, because one of them is like the violence in it a little bit more, and the fact that like you said originally, it was like fighting scene, a little bit of story, fighting scene again. I'm like, that is how the story did flow in 10 and stuff. And then you have the first one, which has starts of the ridiculous storyline with like, yeah, your soul is mine. Shang Tsung in both films, souls are his thing. Souls are his thing. He will always say your soul is mine because that's his thing. Liu Kang loses a brother in both because he loses his actual brother, and then he loses Kung Lao, who he's like, that's my bro. That's my bro.
Brutality.
Brutality. So it's like they both have both qualities. So I think both are encapsulate different parts of the Mortal Kombat, different eras, but also it does encapsulate the stuff. I don't think there could be a perfect film because video games are so different by itself. That's hard. It's really, really hard to capture something where you're playing it versus something that's on a camera. No matter how many angles you can get on a camera, it's still a very certain perspective and a certain apparatus that's different from a video game. So I don't think anyone will ever satisfy people as much as it can. But these two are the closest. Because that's why they're recognized as better. Because if you think about every other film, we can have an episode of the DOA film, but like, none of these. Or, none of the other ones really capture it because it's hard. And even when they accuse video games of being more cinematic, which you can accuse even the newer Mortal Kombats of doing for their cutscenes, it won't be the same thing either. It can't be as movie. It's really hard for them to be a movie because of how you interact with it. So I think it's on both points to say, I think it captures Mortal Kombat fine in their own ways. I do think for like on Mike's blood topic, I do miss in general, I miss old special effects. So I think it could have been like, if we didn't have as much CG. I do think the first one, as fun as, or the second one, as funny as it was to hear them say the lines, it's like at least it wasn't as shoehorned in as it,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
or it said terribly, but it was still kind of funny because I don't know if you guys noticed there was scenes where some things just said awkwardly off screen. Like there's that part where like Liu Kang, is looking at Cabal after he kills him, and off screen, not even like it's still on Cabal. You just hear Liu Kang go like, fatality for Kung Lao, and you're like, why did that look so weird? Like they added that, like ADR'd it later. And that also happened with another scene where I think it was like Cole was fighting, and like off screen the daughter's like, use your like uppercut.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, why is this ADR'd later? Did we need to be told? I don't know. It was like, we can get into the sound and the soundtrack and all that, because I think that's some of the most iconic parts for both films. Do club party scene. I think if that played post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, any part of the years, people are like partied up. They don't have to know Mortal Kombat. They're like do. Yeah, fist bump to this song.
Great to play laser tag too, by the way. I've played several laser tag matches where Mortal Kombat's playing.
Did they survive?
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about the secret greatness of the movie, which is Josh Lawson as Kano?
Can we talk about totally. Kano is great in both.
He's in a completely he's vibrating in a different space in this movie, and it's perfect. He is just an unrepentant bad man who we actually never see. Well, okay, he does some bad things, but it's more he is clearly like the comedic joke of like hard bad man, and he gets slow swept by Liu Kang, and then Kung Lao's just like flawless victory.
Yeah, he's kind of the good, like I feel like they took kind of the Marvel movie trick of like, we're gonna have a character that points out how all ridiculous this is to get like laughs in the movie, which yeah, it worked for me too. I thought he was really funny.
Like in both, like Mike and I were talking about, like in both films, because I think the stereotype of him being like, not him being Australian, but like how, like the stereotype of how he does Australianness and stuff comes from the first film. And I think then that started to continue in the games, and then now these depictions of him as well. That's kind of funny to like, because rewatching again the first one, the '94 one, he was also like that there because he had a shorter time there, but he stole the scenes he was in, and he's like, really, this is really weird. Like, Shang Tsung, why am I listening to this man named Shang Tsung? And then Goro's like, he's Shang Tsung, you should be listening now. Like, he's being ridiculous, and he's sitting back eating. He's like, nom nom. I don't know, mate. Why am I doing? Like, he already points out how ridiculous this is, but he's also already like a bad guy. And the bad things we see him do less in the first film. But it's the sense that like, he's a bad man, but he's like the most annoying bad man. And I think that's always been there. And the second one, you see a lot more of him. It's so funny because they all just like gang up on him. Like Kung Lao, I like fell in love with this Kung Lao, and he was just like, when him and Liu were just having a moment, they're like, let's pick on him. And everyone else at the table was like, you are a little, like, you're a little bee, aren't you? Ha 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 ha, weakling. And like, and he's like, you go, like, I know, I've killed a lot of people. And they're like, yeah, but you got like low swept for like an entire scene. Oh, Sonya almost killed you really easily, like twice, and she doesn't even have powers. Ha ha ha. And they're all like laughing at him. And he gets his angry powers from it, but it's so funny. Like like both Kanos are scene stealers. I know, very quickly, I feel like someone should look at the first Kano, but like who the actors, but like kudos to both, because they're just scene stealers, and they're the stereotype of Kano be like, we see you do simple bad things, like goofy bad stuff, but we know you could do worse. That's the bad part. Like, you're unhinged so clearly, but out of the bad things we see you do is like, well, guys, are you surprised Kano like did a heel turn on people? No, they're not even surprised. Everyone else is like, Kano, yeah, you know what? I could see that. Yeah, you did betray us. And then the first one's, Kano being like, oh, Kano got killed by someone. Yeah, I could see that. Like, even Shang Tsung's like, I mean, like, it's not a real loss to me or anything. Like, he was unimpressed, but also like, God damn it, this guy exists. But again, they're scene stealers all the time. Kano's just a ridiculous dude,
Trevor
and
Go-
I love him more in like the new film than the old one, but he's just iconic by himself.
Trevor Goddard in the original one as Kano has real Phil Baroni energy. If you're a old school MA head, I'll send you guys pictures. He looks like basically Aussie Phil Baroni in the best way.
Is there any other topics you guys wanted to chat about as far as I was thinking maybe we could end when we're ready just talking about video game movies in general. I'm just curious to hear your takes on that after Sam. But if anybody else has any other topics,
I
I
was just
don't
gonna
want to step on.
just the music, just because I think
Yeah.
the soundtrack is so good. I know Marty's our soundtrack guy more, but like it's so good. I don't know how Marty's gonna edit this in. Hi Marty, we shout out to you in the soundtrack.
No, yeah. What were some of those highlights for you? I'm curious because there's definitely the classic like theme, which they kind of nod to in the new one.
I don't like the soundtrack.
I think
Yeah,
when we
yeah.
were watching, we said it was better than like some other one. I want to say that for again like video game movies and for other ones, there's always like the part you reference like the old music. I want to say that it like for both films, they're just kind of like fun. And they're kind of memorable, even if it's good memorable or bad memorable, they're pretty memorable. Like the first one, of course, has like the arcade plus like the remix of that, and again, like that's the club hit sort of thing. I think you could party it down, Vogue, and do whatever to, no matter what year. But like the new one had one where they integrated at different scenes. There was some parts where the soundtrack did go blah blah at you, and those were the annoying parts. But like they did a good job of integrating certain people's themes and certain sounds. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And like while Scorpion's fighting Sub-Zero, they have the parts where it's like that music's integrated the fighting music, and I think it matched with those moments. The funny was, I think the best like maybe soft moment is like that beginning one, which I would do want to kind of jump to like a little bit of the story part where it's like Bihan speaking in Chinese because they're the Lin Kuei are Chinese ninjas, which that's kind of weird in its own thing, but and then Hanzo Hazashi / Scorpion being like Japanese ninjas for the Shiba clan. But like the music that they had for there was like it really sets up like, oh, a soft scene. Oh God, murder's gonna happen, especially if you knew the lore. You're like, oh no, sad times for Scorpy boy over here. But that part was really well set up. But for the most part, the music's pretty like it keeps that same kind of like techno-y, also 8-bitty-ness that the games have, even some of the newer ones, because that's tied to MK. But yeah, for the new one, there was some blah blah like action movie ones that are in newer action movie things. Like, that's awesome.
Right.
But when they reference the old stuff, completely fine. And then again, for the first film, they did a good job as well. Like soft music for the appropriate times, a lot of like the kind of clubby and background music that you would hear if you were in a level of the game. And for backgrounds and stuff, it always matched because the iconic Mortal Kombat bridge is in all the films, and they will forever have like good music to it because that's the bridge you fight on. Well, the multiple bridges you fight on for the games and stuff, but like the music itself stands alone. Like it could be its own soundtrack and probably do very well. We know the first one did. We know 94's did, very specifically the one song, but I think they did a good job. I do wish the second one didn't go a little tropey and tried to do like the blah blah weird other sounds. Like you could have dropped those and kept the ones that are like remixes or maybe close to like the video gamey music for when it was those times.
Maybe I need to go listen to the soundtrack itself as its own thing, because overall I found it largely kind of that forgettable. Out of all the Marvel movies, really, Black Panther has the only really distinct soundtrack sort of problem. But that said, how it is used to subtly build up to the hey guys, we're doing the Mortal Kombat theme. Shout outs to Techno Syndrome. Those parts are effective and technically well done. I just, other than referencing there's nothing in this soundtrack to me that makes me go, ah yes, listen to music.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I like that they didn't really pull that kind of classic theme out until the end. They didn't like, I guess, try and use it too much. They um well, cool. Yeah, this has been a fun conversation about Mortal Kombat, both films. There's like a lot of internet chatter about video game films in general and about how most of them are bad. And then, like, can there ever be a good one? Yada, yada, yada. So I don't want to, like, you know, uh, repeat too much of that here, but I am just curious because, both of you are gamers. What would your ideal video game film be, or what would you like to see them do? And also, oh, I forgot the second part of the question. So let's just go with the first part of the question. Yeah, just like as a gamer, what do you wish they would do more of in video game films, and what do you wish they would do less of? How about that? That's a better question.
Can I take this first? Oh, like when people were all like, "How do you make good DC movies?" You just make good movies. Just make a good movie. What the basics of Western dramaturgy. Scorpion's Revenge does the basics, and it is an effective experience and text. Just do the basics. Like the first Resident Evil movie is solid. I'm trying to think of other. Okay, Final Fantasy Advent Children. You really need the extended cut for it to work. But you know what? That is a video game based. That is a film based on a video game property that works. Just make a good movie. It's just like this isn't rocket science. You're making movies. Just make a good movie.
So, where is the issue then for most video game films for you personally? Just like too much spectacle and not enough of the basic like storytelling, not enough basic like substantive good storytelling.
Yeah, pretty much. Just like it's kind of like it. I'm sorry to be all like basic about this, but it's sort of just you know, like Super Mario Brothers. The narratives that we as players impose upon Super Mario Brothers is there because there's no real story to Super Mario Brothers. It's go rescue Peach.
Right.
But it gets really interesting in Super Mario Brothers 3 because due to the motif of a curtain opening and the ID and the stage designs, you realize that really the game is itself a stage wherein it takes place in some future point where Mario and Bowser are now best friends. And
Well, that's
this is
wild.
them reenacting their trials together. No, seriously,
Hey, is this a fan theory or this is real?
no, it was a fan theory, and then Shigeru Miyamoto was like, "Yeah, pretty much." But it's just like The Last of Us Part 2 is one of the most no, Part 2 is more horrifying to me. Is one of the most horrifying experiences of just dread I've ever had. And because it was telling a good story. Just they're making that Last of Us show with Pedro Pascal and the small bear child. The girl from Game of Thrones, I don't remember her name. Bella Ramsey, is that it? But just you don't have to copy beat for beat from that game because one, it doesn't make sense because it'd be like a 12-hour show, and that's not good television filmmaking. Like that's not good TV storytelling. But there is the structures of how would you tell a story, this kind of story as a film. Maybe there's something about the inherent nature of fighting games where for the longest time their lore was limited to 5 panels that were maybe a little animated after you finished the arcade setup. Makes the whole idea of doing a story hard. That was great English on my front. But it's just like, even to go more obscure, like Tekken Blood Vengeance. That animated the CGI animated film, it is not a great movie, but it tells a story in a cinematic form that fits to the medium. And so tell stories that fit the medium. Like Last of Us Part 2 would not make a good TV show as it is if you're just like, here's an hour. It wouldn't, because there would be boring parts and all that. But at the same time, if they do Last of Us Part 2, the TV show, if there isn't the terrible bone arm splitting break that is torture porn, and then the whole part about amputating that arm, it'll lose something. But those moments worked because of, and okay, well, this is going into like idea of like medium specifics, and really should you use gameplay to tell stories? But sidetrack, not going to go down that road. Yeah, I said words. Samantha, go.
To go off Mike's point, he does it to also like the audience who's listening in. If we were to really like, if we were to ask you right now, like, what do you think video game movies? Were you thinking some of the ones that Mike was thinking of, which were like directly animated, or like that just tied straight to story? Or were you thinking it was like the pixels, or like the other ones were live action? Because I think when people think we're gonna make a video game movie, and the ones that do get, you know, dragged a lot is the live action ones. We do say also the ones that are just animated are usually not always the greatest either, but to that, it's like maybe a lot of these videos, because of how they are, like they said, the format should match. And I agree with that, Rebecca, where it doesn't work for all of these. Like to make a live action Tekken or live action DOA, they tried. They really tried. And again, fighting games are also weirder because there's like a 3-point story. If you really were to take the simplest format, it's like, I went to a tournament to fight. The end. And then like their little character things in between. But for even other ones, it's way too long, complex. If we're thinking RPGs, like I would love to see, yes, there has been Dragon Quest and Dragon Age movies. But like if you actually said like, oh no, let's make like a full like live action Dragon Age movie, like that's way too long. It would if you do it, it should be, if you were to have a movie, it should probably match the format. And it depends on what you're telling. If it's a prequel, make sure it can fit the time. Make sure, again, the simplest thing, just tell a good story. I think the biggest problem with a lot of them is, especially if it's video game or video game to live action, it's been, oh, how can we shoehorn in things that are the video game? You're like, no, that's hard because it's a different experience. Earlier when I mentioned the apparatus, like, you're holding a controller, you're holding, a key, mouse and keyboard. That's different of like how you're doing the stuff. That even if it's not story, like these movies are sometimes obsessed with trying to be like, okay, we're going to show like the first person point of view. If it's like a Call of Duty film, or the Doom movie, I think had a part where it did go into like first person. It looked like Doom, and you're like, that doesn't actually work. And it can either come off goofy or like way too like, guys, you need to stop. Or the other part where they're trying to show in the story elements way too much, like the weird parts of it. Because there's good ones, like in the Mortal Kombat ones, there's good ones, like Bihan versus, Hanzo Sashi / Scorpion versus Sub-Zero. That's good by itself. But that'd be like, all right, guys, now we can do all the deep lore of the Elder Gods and be like, oh God, not that. All right, like they're trying to, like, they're very obsessing of trying to do the same as well. When it's like, why can't I just play the game or watch someone do all the cutscenes? Because they did it better. And my experience is different. So especially if we're talking like an RPG, so like a role-playing game, my experience of playing Commander Shepard in Mass Effect is going to be different from Mike's. It's going to be different from Reed's. It's going to be different from someone else's. So those ones are also hard. So maybe like pick one. Like if we were to do I would love to see another like Mass Effect film. I wouldn't actually mind to see how would a live action look, but what story would you tell? And there's enough where you could be like, oh, maybe something like a prequel. Maybe like a random story of someone else. And they had done that in an animated format, like a literal, there's an anime movie, but it really just depends. So I think the simplest thing is good story. That's all we ask for, a good story. Because again, our standards for all these films are pretty low. Like,
right.
We have to be honest, they're pretty low. We're like, does it do this, and that because we know the game is like better. Like I have a more emotional attachment to like Last of Us 1 than like if they did, let's say they did a movie that literally was trying to do beat by beat by beat, which then at worst it's 3 hours. The game is much longer than that. That's also a thing to consider. Games are much longer than the actual format. So a show might be better. So also think about the format. Would making an animated version be better? Does it have to be live action? Probably not. And I think a big issue that I've also seen in other ones, it's let's say it's a film that has nothing to do with the actual games. So let's go to Pixels as an example. But games are involved. Pixels and Ready Player One. These are films where it's like the story happens, but like the games exist in it, and they're shoehorning references that you're like, I feel like it's insulting the game more than it is doing anything for it. At worst, it's like a slight promotion for it, but it's like, guys, it's kind of insulting to the actual game. No offense. And I think a video game movie that's kind of one, but an original in-game video game movie, guys, Tron. Think about it. It's an in-game video game movie. It by itself made good video games, or it had a place in Kingdom Hearts, which was a good level in Kingdom Hearts. But, just think about that, where it's like you can make your own. If you're doing a narrative story that involves a video game, you can make your own video game. If Tron did it, it's fine. And not to say everyone copy Tron, but like, you can have one. Don't make it like the fakest of fake video games, so that we get to the other issue of like the CSI, or what was it? I think it was CSI. Like the
I
Law
was
and
a
Order
CSI.
episode.
Yeah, Law and Order. Yeah, exactly.
They both did it, where there's like, how do we depict video games? And it's stuck in a very certain era. And they're like, oh, what game are we playing? It's like, oh, it's called March Madness of Murder 10. So I think it's just how you treat it. Like, respect video games because they're not bad. They are art, and they are a different thing to play with. They have their own studies. They have their own stuff. They're not inherently all violent. So treat them with respect in the other formats that you ask to be treated with is the simplest thing. Give them a good story, again, is the biggest one, but that's kind of comes with it. Like, treat them with respect too, because they're not just, they're just for kids, or just for like dumb teens. Like, no, a lot of these have a lot of value. Again, like Last of Us 1 sticks with so many people. Your own playthroughs of Mass Effect and Dragon Age and Dragon Quest all are different. Even your one of Mario, a simple game, is going to be different. Your memories of it. It's a respectful thing. So I think just respect it back and you'll get a good product. And which is why, in a sense, the Mortal Kombat films are the best of them, because they were more respectful and the people were able to collaborate more, versus like, all right, guys, you're just going to have pixels. You're going to have this. Like, just tell a good story. Our standards are low, so tell a good one. And just match the format. Video games are much longer than your actual film. And maybe you can get TV shows, and you don't have to be live action. Stop. You don't need all of them to be live action. It doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah, I guess for me, what I'd like to see is just, I guess, kind of goes on with your point about Tron. Is like, I was going to say Scott Pilgrim is kind of my favorite video game movie if I had to cheat. Like, it really uses a lot of video game kind of aesthetics and tropes. And I mean, it does with comic books and movies. It's definitely like very multimedia in its allusions and references. But I think for me, that's kind of the most satisfying use of video games in a film. So I just love to see more like creative integration of like video game mechanics and tropes and kind of aesthetics, instead of just, pay me some fan lip service by like recreating fatalities. Like, when it, like you guys are saying, you could just like watch them on YouTube. So that's that's sort of my feelings. I think that was well said by all of you. They should listen to all of us, call us in. We'll pitch some good video game ideas, right?
We might take kids out and laser tag to Mortal Kombat for you guys if you need it.
I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to provide that service. Any other final thoughts or words about Mortal Kombat or video game movies?
Be nice to each other. Don't fight one another to the death.
Yes, I agree with that.
If you get low kicked and low sweeped online, you know what? Don't friend request and then send them hate. Learn how to block.
Get good, right?
Okay, good. It's not about fatalities, it's about friendships.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
That's it for our show this week. Thank you for listening and for your support. Please subscribe to the show on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at Cineposium and on Twitter at Cposium to keep up with our updates and to keep in communication with us. Until next week, take care, everyone.